Welcome to the Earth's Edge podcast. I'm your host, James McManus. At Earth's Edge, we run guided expeditions with a focus on environmental and cultural sustainability. We created this podcast to share stories from people who have found the outdoors and fallen in love with adventure. Each month, we're giving away one of our summit jackets worth €150. To be in the running, all you need to do is subscribe to our mailing list at earths-edge.com/podcast. There's a link in the show notes. Now, for today's guest.
The thing that I always say to people on the summit morning before we head out the door is, just one foot in front of the other and just being able to go into your own zone and just keep going and going and going.
That was Byrne, a very good friend of mine and one of our most experienced guides at Earth's Edge. I wanted to get Aaron on the podcast because he's got some really good big mountain experience from the likes of Denali, Khan Tengri and Peak Lenin in Kyrgyzstan. So I think it'd be really useful for any of you guys that have done Kilimanjaro or Elbrus and want to take the step up. We start out chatting about his childhood growing up to Wicklow and how he got into the outdoors, and then we get on to sharing some epic stories from big trips. I really hope you guys enjoy this one. Cheers.
I was involved in scouting in the earlier days, as a young teenager for a couple of years. So I got a little bit of an introduction to mountains and mountaineering there. My sports back in those days was football, hurling, soccer, that kind of stuff. It wasn't really until after a trip to Australia for a year, visited the Blue Mountains out there.
Class.
When I came back, went to Tighlin and did a mountain skills course. From then, I really got involved in it, so I finished the mountain skills program. Then I went on to do the summer mountain leader program. During those years, I was still working in manufacturing and engineering, which I still do today on and off. So it wasn't a full-time job for me then, it was more of a hobby. I was getting more and more tired of going to a factory every day. It seemed like a good idea in 2005 to pack in all the manufacturing and go full on for mountaineering. So I set up a company called Mountain Ventures. I rented an old Oiga hostel in the Wicklow Mountains. I started doing mountain skills courses there and guided walks and stuff like that. So that all kicked off in 2006.
Cool.
And I had that running for about 10 years.
Come here, what was the first big mountain that you climbed?
Well, myself and my brother, we climbed a lot together then, and we managed to get some rock climbing gear off somebody else, and we started teaching ourselves how to use that, which was amusing at times and deadly dangerous at other times.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But, through Tighlin and doing the mountain skills and mountain leader programs, I'd bumped into a guy called Will Rock. Before our first trip to the French Alps in 2001, we decided that obviously the first mountain we should climb is Mount Blanc, because it's the highest in the Alps.
Mont Blanc.
Will took us into Dalkey Quarry and showed us how to do crevasse rescues there. And we headed off to France in 2001. And we had a good trip. We successfully climbed Mont Blanc. We came back down off the mountain and the whole world had gone mad because the Twin Towers had been attacked and we didn't really know what was going on. It was all in French and it took us a few days to figure out what was happening in the world. But
that's funny, man, because normally you go in a big long trip and you're you coming back off being offline for 2 weeks and you're the world is all going to have changed and but it's exactly the same. No, everyone's doing the same stuff. But in your case, in this one, it was the world has changed completely.
Yeah, big time. It took us a couple of days to get home because flights were cancelled and everything else. But our flight was redirected to Germany or somewhere, and then we caught a news there with English, and we figured out, my God.
So come here, I was going to ask you, right? We've had a good few of our expedition leaders on the podcast chatting about different trips we run, and I know you've done a ton of trips for us, including being on Kilimanjaro over 8 times. But what I want to chat to you, I know we'll get on and talk about our trip to Denali. I know you've been on a few 7,000 meter peaks, but that's really what I want to talk to you about today. Kind of people who have done, let's say, Kili and are thinking of going on to do Elbrus and Aconcagua and kind of harder mountains in your experience there. What was your first big kind of siege proper expedition that you went on? How was it?
The first one I went on was in 2008 and the highest one we'd been on was Mont Blanc. We selected off a magazine picture a mountain called Khan Tengri in Kyrgyzstan. I showed it to Ronan Lenihan and a couple of other people, Brendan Byrne and Allegra Lawler, and we decided, it's a beautiful, absolutely beautiful mountain, real classic pyramid shape, just under 7,000 meters, like 5 meters short of 7,000 meters, and we said, let's give that a go. So we started preparing for it, but I think psychologically it's hard doing mountains like that. The plan would have been to be there for a month, but actually I really struggled on it because I didn't understand the situation about sitting around in tents for days and days and days on end. I got a little bit antsy. There was actually quite a lot of objective dangers. There'd been some accidents. There was people in trouble. Yeah, it kind of freaked me out a little bit. And a lot of people like to sit around talking about these tragedies and these dramas that are unfolding all around you, but it didn't help me at all. So actually, I wanted to get out of there as quick as possible. So that was my first foray into a 7,000 meter peak, and it really took me by surprise. But at the same time, when I came home and thought about it, I realized, God, there's a lot of things to get your head around before you start doing something like that. But it was a huge learning curve and really useful for the next 7,000 meter that I attempted. So the Khan Tengri trip was unsuccessful in that we didn't climb to the summit, but we got pretty close. It was very successful in that it was huge amount of learning for me, and all of that then we took to Peak Lenin in 2011, I think, Peak Lenin.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting what you're saying there, because I was on Aconcagua with a group in 2015, and we got into base camp. You walk 3 days into Plaza Argentina, and we got there, like, you know yourself, like from these big mountains, like there's teams from all over the world. There was 9 Irish clients, myself and a doctor, and they'd never been on a big mountain before, and I hadn't been on Aconcagua before. I was going to lead it for the first time. So like when you get to base camp, there's just people from all over the world, and all they want to talk about is negativity higher up the mountain. Yeah. So I had to sit my guys down and just say, listen, guys, let's just trust the process here and just cut all that noise out. Like our local guide, Packy, is absolutely savage. Like he's been on the mountain like 70 times and he's 30 successful trips. So let's just put your trust in me and him, and we'll get you there, because you can get really freaked out by what other people are telling you.
Yeah, and it's easy to look at other teams and think, oh God, those guys are really professional. They're much fitter. They're much stronger. They're better than you in every way, but actually the reality is very different. And actually the reality and the truth about all of those stories that you hear in places like that is you're not getting the full picture. You're getting bits and pieces of it. So it's very easy to get carried away with listening to that, but it's not useful.
Yeah, I'll never forget being on Musagata in China with Anne and Ronan as well. And like when we got to base camp, like there was teams from Austria and Switzerland and like the States, Russia, and everyone's kind of got the chest out at the start, like, and Anne, like, who we both climb with a lot, and like she's an absolute machine, like she's tougher than either of us, and she's really strong, but she's an absolute fecker for looking around at the start and getting intimidated by other people. I'm like, listen, like, we'll see what happens, surely as the days roll past, you just see people leaving for whatever reason. Like it's a mental battle, isn't it? Like these big mountains,
especially the Russians. You hold yourself up in comparison to a Russian, you're not going to come out very well. It's just a simple fact of life. But you can learn from them as well. Sure. They can, and they're friendly, and they're people that you should talk to because they know what's going on. There's a lot. You have to figure out who's useful to listen to and who isn't.
Yeah. It's great fun, really, like once you're not freaking out yourself. Like it's just, I love the psychology of it all, it's just funny. So just to recap here, guys, we're talking about big expeditions that Aaron and some of them we've been on together. We don't actually run these as commercial trips, but actually, man, we're running a trip to Peak Lenin this summer, our first commercial trip there. So it's a mountain. It'd be great to hear your experience of that. I was there myself in 2016, I think. But how did you go out there, man?
Pretty good, actually, although we didn't summit. And I think that's something that everybody needs to realize when they're going on a big trip is you have to be prepared not to summit as well,
Totally.
That you don't, So we didn't do anything wrong. We just got a bit of bad luck on weather. It was extremely cold. Everything went fairly well to plan, except for we just got beaten back on the last day. And we were there late in season as well. So we didn't get another opportunity to go back again. So we got stormbound, and then we had to come off the mountain. Then it was basically the mountain was closing for the season, so the weather was never going to improve again. So we got out there. But yeah, it was a good trip. A couple of American guys on it. One guy was skiing, actually. He skied off from our highest point and injured himself on the way down. So we got involved in the in an evacuation of sorts. The poor guy had to be put on a kind of a makeshift stretcher. The Irish broke trail, and the Russians dragged this poor guy through the snow all the way back down, then stuck him up on a horse. And you'll probably remember that trail coming out of there. There's really steep ravines that the trail
absolutely
winds along. And this poor guy, he was more terrified coming down on the horse than he was when he fell off when he was skiing.
I know, man. And so you to stretcher him down between Camp 2 and Camp 1, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, God, that's a heavily crevassed section, yes, man. That's pretty full on, like.
And we were leading it, and it wasn't wanded or anything. So we actually ended up making a new trail by accident. We got everybody down anyway. And Anne was actually there. She was doing a lot of the first aid on the American guy.
I'm going to have to get her on the podcast as well. You know, she's another one of our expedition leaders. So, come here. You were working for, like, leading expeditions for me at Earth's Edge for a few years. And then in 2017, we myself, yourself, Anne, and then another friend of ours, Chris, we all went to Denali together. Mm-hmm. What are your memories from that trip, man? We had such a laugh, didn't we? Like, it was great. Like
snoring.
Yeah.
I was in the tent with Chris, and he was pretty amazing at snoring. And he was able to. I caught him on maybe the second or third last night. He was laying his head towards the pillow. His eyes were still open, and he started snoring at that point. So it was pretty full on. I don't know how many days we were up there.
I think we were 16 or 18, were we? We were away for 30 days in total, I think. I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, well, I think we had amazing luck that time with the weather. We didn't miss a beat, did we?
Nah.
It was fantastic.
Apart from the summit day, man, we had some bad weather on the summit day.
Yeah, on the way back down, yeah, we had a bit of a
for sure, yeah.
lead on the way.
You played it. But I mean, what an incredible place. Like, I mean, Alaska is just absolutely stunning, isn't it? Like, so just for any of you guys that have done something like Elbrus or Aconcagua, like Denali's one of the 7 summits, kind of the next step up. If you've done Kili as well, if you're going for your 4th one, it's a really good one. But the way the permits work over there, we'd love to run expeditions there, but we can't. There's only 5 American companies that are allowed to run commercial trips. We were really lucky with the weather, you know, and like it's a real, like all these big mountains, like Denali, it's only just over 6,000 meters, but because it's so close to the pole, it feels, and the North Pole, it feels tougher. I don't know like there's a technical reason for that, isn't it? It feels like it's higher altitude, but yeah, it's beyond my pay grade. Like, but you're carrying a 25 kg pack, right? You're dragging a sled, another 30 kg in that. You're all roped together. Like the whole thing is heavily crevassed, like, you know. So we had really good fun, like a few touchy moments, like when people aren't fed in water properly, like. But the funny bit for us is 2 funny stories I want to remind you of. You fly into Alaska, right? And then you drive up to a place called Talkeetna, and then you take a little 8-seater plane and they drop you on a glacier called the Talkeetna Glacier, yeah? Yeah, Talkeetna. And basically they take off again and they leave you there. And then when you're coming back out, you call them on the sat phone or you radio them and they come pick you up when you're finished. Yeah. But you're basically abandoned there, right, in the side of a mountain. That was fine. We had a really successful trip. A lot of bad weather on the summit day. It got a bit hairy there. But the last day of our expedition, walking back out, when you're like on the home run, is supposed to be the handiest day. Like, you know, it's the walkout. Everybody's walked off Kili or whatever. It's supposed to be easy, but the whole thing is a massive, massive glacier. And when we were coming out, so the 4 of us are walking together. We're all connected by rope and we're all dragging a sled each. It was really, really heavily crevassed. And a lot of the snow had melted since we walked up. So we were just surrounded by crevasses. Like, and I remember one time, man, I swear to God, like it seemed like we were trying to pick a line through it and see ones from previous teams. And like, I was like, which way are we going to go here? Because literally in every direction, I could see a crevasse. So there was these 2 lads, right? They're from Utah. And like, listen, I'm not a religious person myself, but these guys were Mormons, you know? And things got so desperate for us. Like, we were like, sure, at least those lads have God on their side. We can follow them, you know?
And do you remember those guys actually put water on for us when they saw us coming down off the summit the day before? They put water on for us. Do you remember that?
They were lovely fellas,
Yeah,
weren't
yeah.
they? They were nice. We actually met them back in town afterwards, like, because you remember they took a little break and they let us pass them out because they wanted us to go first. They wanted one of us to fall in the crevasse.
But we were following them, right?
Yeah.
We were following them, and then when we caught up to them while they were having a break, they kind of turned around and said, would you guys mind going ahead? Because we don't really know where we're going.
And your ego is going like, oh yeah, no problem, we can lead from here. But in your mind, you're going, oh God, no, you guys go first, because like you don't want to have to sort something out, especially coming off that expedition. And the other one, and I love this story as well. So Talkeetna is a little town that you start and finish the expedition from, and it's like the Wild West, isn't it, man?
Yeah.
It's like a one street town with a couple of bars and all that. So obviously, we got back off the mountain, like probably all, like I speak for myself, like probably a stone and a half lighter from just not having enough food up there. We needed to put on calories again, to nurse ourselves back to health. So the best way of doing that is going for a few pints, right?
Yeah.
Thing is, like, we were in Alaska in the middle of in June, like we had the longest day of the year, and because it's so far north, it was bright all day and all night.
Yeah.
It was like all the time day. So we got in there, like, and like, the 3 or 4 of us from Ireland, and like stereotypes about drinking too much, but we were just so excited and so happy we all summited, and we wanted to celebrate our success. So you go into the pub, right, and you'd start drinking a few pints. And then when, like, you'd look at your watch, what you thought was like 7, 8 o'clock in the evening, turns out like it's 3 o'clock in the morning, like, and you're like, oh my God, right? So the funny thing is I was organising accommodation for us, and I kind of got at last minute this girl called Jenny, actually, that was in the bar. She organised to stay in the little bunkhouse, right? But we ended up going on the beer for a few days, and because we stayed up so late, right, we were up till 3 or 4 in the light, having the crack in the pub. They were serving all night, like.
Yeah,
we come back into the bunkhouse late, and we'd be in bed then till recovering and putting on weight. This is the PC way of doing it. We were in bed till 1 o'clock, like. And I'd go into the house and say hello to Jenny, and she's like, you're after missing checkout. And I'd be like, oh no, we'll stay another night, And this happened about 3 days in a row, like. And eventually she goes to me, you Irish, you're not going to climb the mountain, you ain't going to do shit. Because she actually thought that, like, we'd arrived in Talkeetna and we're going to go on the mountain any day, but just kept drinking, like, it was so funny, like. I love that trip, man. It was something special about Alaska, wasn't it?
Oh yeah,
it's like,
and that
beautiful.
Talkeetna. I don't know what it'd be like to do a winter there or a long period of time there. Maybe it might get a little bit. You meet so many great people, and a lot of crazy people. A lot of people up there. Just not so many locals, so to speak. There's a lot of people have moved up there from the lower states, and they're all just having a great time. It's like a frontier town. It's still got that vibe to it, but you're meeting people, and you kind of think, you meet somebody and say, oh, how are you doing? What kind of crazy are you? Because they've all got some kind of crazy attitude going on.
They're all a bit funky as well. I remember, like, obviously there's grizzly bears and all kinds of wildlife up there, but you remember one day we were having lunch, like, and someone comes up to us, it's like, there's a bear in town, like.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to lock myself in my room and wait it out, like, or can I go around, or what's going on? It was just every second day or two, be like, there's a grizzly bear after being spotted, like, be careful, like. Do you know what I mean? You're just like, okay, right, what am I supposed to do now, like, That was a cracking trip.
Right.
But Aaron, like, we're looking back on all these fond memories of that trip and laughing about it and all that, but like, there's so much hardship on a big mountain like that. Like, what is it about it that you love, man, about big expeditions?
There is days now where or there are days where you'd wonder why you're there and what you're doing it for. But I think reaching summits is one of the things that kind of keeps you going, but also just having to crash as well. I've had tough days on those big mountains for sure, yeah. And I mentioned earlier about how psychologically tough it was on the first 7,000 meter peak I went to. But also closer to home, I've had very, very tough times on mountains in Scotland in winter.
Yeah.
So after I did the summer mountain leader program, I went on to do the winter mountain leader program. It took me quite a number of years because often the conditions in Scotland aren't brilliant. So it took me a number of years to get the logbook sorted out and then eventually do the assessment. But I remember on my assessment, the assessment goes on for 5 days, and part of that is a 3-day expedition with 2 overnights in the snow hole. So you got to go out into the mountain, dig your own snow hole, and stay there for a couple of nights. All the while you're being assessed for your navigation skills and your group leadership skills and whatnot. On the first day of our exped, a huge storm came in. It just started snowing from the moment we left. We got to our location for the snow hole, and we had to dig that out. And some of the group weren't able to keep going, and there's only a few of us still fit to keep digging this snow. If anybody's ever dug a snow hole, it takes about 4 or 5 hours to dig a proper one. And it's we got radio the next morning anyway to say to come back in because the weather was not going to improve. But I remember walking out that day, and we'd spent all day walking in the day before, and we had to make our way back out roughly the same way. But we were in it for about 8 or 9 hours. It was taking us about 100 minutes to do 1 kilometre. So they're quite tough. And
Scotland, like, you know, you're kind of thinking, it's just for anyone that hasn't been over there, you know, you look at it from an Irish perspective, the mountains are just that little bit bigger, like, but the difference is massive, man. Like, if you want to toughen yourself up for big mountains, like,
it's brilliant.
Scotland is phenomenal for that because the conditions are just so harsh, aren't they? Like,
they are, and it's really wet, cold. You know, we experienced minus 35, minus 40 on Denali, but it didn't really seem to be that cold.
No.
Like, if you're in minus 15, 16 in Scotland, it just breaks your bones and you just can't get warm. Yeah, everybody should try and do, if they're planning on doing big mountains, Scotland is a brilliant place to cut your teeth, just to figure out how to camp and what gear you need and psychologically keeping going, and it's good for you. It really is.
Yeah, it's a great experience up there, isn't it? You know, we're not going to get in and talk about the pandemic too much, but all going to plan. You and I we're heading off to do Ama de Blam in November. Definitely going to be a different style of mountain. Like, I've been on a good few 7,000 meter peaks now, and Ama de Blam is 6,800 meters, but it's much more of a climbing mountain and different challenge for us. Like, what's really attracted you to that mountain?
You know, Denali is that kind of they often say that you camp your way up Denali. It's all about camping, and it's that kind of a skill. You know, yes, there's crevasses and there's ropes required, but you're never really climbing at a high degree. But yeah, Ama de Blam is very different in that regard. It's technical, and definitely it'd be very interesting to operate at that kind of technical level in that altitude as well. So even Khan Tengri and Peak Lenin, they're not technically challenging mountains either. They're just high. Yeah, I think Ama de Blam be good from that point of view.
Yeah, I'm excited about it, man. It's the itinerary's sick. Like, we've kind of, there's 4 of us going. We're kind of doing our own thing out there. But yeah, we're going to bag Le Boche as well. It's going to be class. Like, it's just going to be, I mean, it would be amazing to go, wouldn't it? You just kind of feel so close, but yet so far away with the pandemic. But
yeah.
I'm confident, man.
Hopefully we get the green light. But
that's it, dude. And what are you thinking? What other mountains are on your bucket list? Like, anything stand out to you, like, you'd like to try?
Yeah, I definitely like to try more 7,000ers. I like that whole idea of being out there for 4 weeks. Definitely more 7,000 and more time in the Himalayas. I haven't, I've only been a couple of times, and I'd like to spend more time there for sure. Maybe at some point working up to an 8,000er. I'm not all that keen on going to the point where it's oxygen is a kind of requirement. So I just want to find out what that height level is for me for to be able to function without the supplemental oxygen. So I'll probably stick around there because I mean, there's so many peaks to do.
Yeah,
I was saying this to you before as well about the logistical challenge of climbing something that hasn't been climbed before, and there's so many of those as well. That'd be an excellent idea, I think. I just love the whole idea of just going where no man's gone before. Yeah,
I really want to go climb something big in Pakistan as well. You know, I think that would be great. You know, I'd love to do that. Just the challenge of the logistics of it. It's just one of those places. Like, you could do something like Choyu would be a nice, probably the most logical 8,000 meter peak to start first. But I don't know. I want to go to the Karakoram and just the logistics of it, and it's just going to be harder, isn't it? Yeah. I'll probably go out there now and I'll be like, you'll be giving me a rollicking going, why didn't we go to Choyu? Why didn't you big ginger fecker, yeah, like, you know?
Aaron, hang on there 1 second. I just want to bring Ariana in to chat to us about B Corp. Hey, Ariana.
Hiya, James.
So what have you got for us today?
Well, I just want to briefly explain how the B Corp assessment works for those of you who might be considering getting your business certified. The assessment is broken down into 5 sections: governance, workers, community, environment, and customers. The questions for each section are determined by company size and what sector your business is in, with the end goal of improving your company's social and environmental impact. A company must achieve a minimum score of 80 to become certified.
It's a really detailed assessment, isn't it?
It really is. It looks at every aspect of your business and it can take months, if not longer, to complete. But believe me, it's well worth the time and effort. After completing it, you're given info on how you can improve your business so it has a more positive impact on our communities and the environment, as well as your staff and customers. I'll be back next week to talk about our goals for the future and how we plan to keep improving our impact on the planet and its people.
Sounds great, dude. Chat to you next week.
Thanks a mil, James. Chat soon.
Aaron, a lot of our listeners will have done the likes of Kilimanjaro, Base Camp or Machu Picchu before. You know, if you were talking to someone who'd never been on an expedition before and they're thinking about doing Kilimanjaro for the first time, like what would you tell them about the trip and what advice would you give them in regard to preparation?
Yeah, well, it's a great trip. The short safari at the end is brilliant as well. And it's such a unique experience going to Africa. It's achievable for 99% of people. It really is. It's the kind of peak that if you do some training before you go physically, most people can get through it. You know, it's got a lovely variety of topography as well as you're going up and back down. You know, so we always use the Machame route, which is really good as well and it's a sensible timetable that we use as well. It's 7 days, so you can do it faster, but I certainly wouldn't advise it. So yeah, I mean, I think as what I always say to people fitness wise, I mean, you just need to be able to go day after day. I mean, the days aren't hugely long, apart from the summit day, 4 or 5 hours each day. So, you know, if you're able to get out and do 8 hours Saturday and Sunday, you're probably physically ready for it. Other than that, then the other thing that I've noticed that catches people off guard is the camping part. The camping on our trips is quite luxurious. It's very nicely done.
It is.
And you get fed very well, and there's toilet tents and all of that. But sometimes even at that, it catches people off guard. So it's a good idea to get out and do a little bit of camping beforehand as well, maybe just to find your way around all your gear and figure out what you need and don't need. A lot of people bring stuff that they're never going to use, and they're carrying it all with them, and you know, so.
Yeah, that's steady advice, man. Actually, that's something that's really interesting. Like, I think getting yourself physically fit is so important. I think a lot of people have stressed that, different guides and doctors on the trip. It's so important because the fitter you are, the more you're going to enjoy it.
True.
If you're just fit enough, like you're going to spend most of your time looking at the feet or the arse of the person in front of you as you're walking up the mountain. But that tip about camping is so key because it's a huge part of it. You know, it's harder to sleep in a tent and that kind of thing. It's a really good skill. So even getting out with your gear in the back garden in a tent to do the job, wouldn't it? Like, it'd really help people.
Need to figure out your system, you know, because you're sharing a tent with somebody else, so your system needs to be sympathetic towards them as well. You can't spend out all over the place. A lot of people find that they have stuff that they don't take out of their bag, you know, so that's going back to the psychological part of it again as well, is that especially on summit day, the thing that I always say to people on the summit morning before we head out the door is, you know, you've been physically training for this for 6 months maybe. Now in the last 6 days you've been physically training in altitude and getting used to that. Today, the summit day is mostly about tuning out and just one foot in front of the other and just being able to go into your own zone and just keep going and going and going for longer than you want to. I always break it down for people in that, you know, the first step is it starts to get a little bit brighter. Then the sun comes up on your back, and every time you reach a milestone, then you get the stellar point. Every time you reach a milestone, you just get that little bit more energy and it keeps pushing on. And then you get to the summit, and of course, people who are really finding it really hard on their way up to the summit, get to the summit, and they have a totally new lease of life. They can't imagine how they're going to get back down again, but they do. So yeah, it's just people are a little bit worried about what their body can handle, and they don't really, maybe they haven't pushed their body to that level of fatigue before, but it's okay. You know, you can do it, and you can get back down, and you've got the bragging rights.
I nearly burst out laughing when you're explaining that there, because you're going, people who get to the top and they're finding it very tough, you know? Yeah, but it is like it's kind of the thing I like about climbing a big, like seeing clients climb big mountains, especially on Kili, like because we do it so often. But I always find it like, you know, I'd be pretty fit, you know, when you get to the top of Kitty and you're like really tired yourself and you turn around, there's someone like who only, let's say it's October and they started hiking in the previous February, you know, they're 6 months into hiking and they're climbing a 6,000 meter peak.
Yeah.
I just think they're incredible, aren't they? Like, it's just the most amazing thing. And then when they come back off the trip, like, you just get that sense of saying, like, geez, if I can do that, I can
do it.
There's no stopping me, you know, and they can transfer that confidence into different parts of their lives, which I think is really nice. I love being able to facilitate that in a small way myself. It's so cool. Like,
and it's always very interesting to see how people react to the conditions as well, isn't it? You can't say who's going to be in what condition at any point, really. It just goes up and down all the time. And it's just interesting watching it all unfold. And I think people often get a fright on the first day or two. I think, oh God, this is really hard. But they settle into it. They find a rhythm and they just keep going.
Yeah. You know, you can see people at the start of a big mountain like that who are quite fit, but if they're not good at sleeping, like, that can really sap the energy out of them. If they haven't slept for 2 or 3 days, kind of halfway through the expedition, they can really catch up with them. But the other thing I think, which is important on a 7,000 meter peak or an 8,000 meter peak, or even on something like Kili or any of these trips, it's to kind of stay in the moment and try and kind of, maybe win each day is too strong a word, but just kind of focus on, okay, and really try and enjoy it and have the crack, like, because you see people like just really focusing on the summit and getting there and ticking the box, where it's much, much more than that. Yeah. And the same with us, like on big mountains, like, you have your little piece of paper and a pen and you're counting ahead 20 days and you're like, if it all goes to plan, it's like, it's fool's play, like, do you know what I mean? You're only counting yourself, like, you know, it's kind of, you've got so many variables, and it's just to kind of gradually move up the mountain and stay in good condition is what it's all about, really, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's about just that day in hand and just keep going that day. Worry about the next day when you get back to your tent and you're in your sleeping bag and you can figure out what's going to happen the following day. Then things change so quickly and you just have to adapt to the weather and everything else, you know.
Yeah, and it's known that you're going to have a fair bit of type 2 and lots of type 2 and the odd bit of type 3 fun, you know. So I don't know if you've heard that before, like, but yeah, type 1 is just, you know, if we're after climbing Denali and we're in the pub and we're having the crack, you know, and we're jeering some Americans, them thinking we're being genuinely nice, but we're actually taking the mick, like, as is part of our culture here in Ireland. That's type 1 fun. It's just pure crack. Type 2 fun is like when you're on the summit day of Denali, like, where it's absolute hardship, but you look back with like pure joy, you know.
Oh God, I can't wait to hear what type 3 is.
Type 3 fun is just no fun, and looking back at it, it's no fun either, you know.
Yeah.
Have you any good type 3 stories, man? Type 3 fun stories?
I don't know whether I've conditioned myself to forget all those type 3 stories, because
there's always one or two, you know, when you're on that cold nights. But I always think it's funny, like, if you had a group off Kili, right, they're back in Arusha day after the mountain. If you said to any of them, like, I guarantee, if you say, hey guys, like, if anyone wants to go back up the mountain, we're going to leave again today, you can go for free, nobody would go.
No.
Nobody, everyone would be like, no way. But you ask them the same question 3 weeks later, they'd probably all be like, yeah, let's go. Yeah. Let's do it again, you know? It's just that little bit of time gap. It's like doing an ultra marathon or something like that, you know. It's not fun at the time, but looking back. and that's the thing, man. Like, you know, like, in many years when we're looking back, and, well, I don't know, because I'm not an old person myself. I'm not young either. But, like, I think when we look back in our life, like, for us, these big mountains, these adventures are really going to be the highlights, you know. So I think it's so important, especially this last year we've had. Like, it just makes me want to get out and experience things so much more and not take it for granted, you know.
And I think we're lucky in this sport as well, because you can continue doing this sport at some level forever, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember one of my first trips to the Alps. We ended up staying in this old stone hut one night, but the next morning we were hitting the trail again, and we bumped into this, I guess it must have been a bus full of people, but they were up around 3,500 meters, and they were all in their mid-70s, kind of plodding along at their own pace. You can keep climbing mountains for a long, long time. It's not like football or stuff like that, you know. You kind of, at a certain age, you kind of have to stop playing football, but with mountaineering, you can keep going, and you can keep, if it's rock climbing you're into, or siege mountaineering, or that kind of, we can do them all.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it?
We have a long career ahead of us.
It's cool. That is the best thing. Is like, any other sport, you're like, I do a lot of getting back into ultra running and that, like, and that's the same, man. It's an old man's game. It's so nice. Like,
Yeah.
I actually had a friend of mine, Stephen O'Donoghue, who's on the podcast a few weeks ago, and I think he's in his mid-50s now, and he's like, I'm going to do one more trip and then I'm going to retire. And it's absolute horseshit because, like, my old fella's 70, 75. He's planning on going to Machu Picchu next year. Like, so it's deadly, like something to aim towards, to have a long career ahead of us. So yeah, it's a really good point, man.
Actually, for those high altitude mountains, age is I think it's a benefit. You got to take your time on those mountains,
When you're young, like, sure, I remember in 2003, I think it was 2003, the first time I was in India. I was only around 21, 22. We're on a big kayak expedition in Ladakh. Like, we ran this really tough river called Zanskar. And like Denali, like, you always, on a big kayak expedition, you leave a bit of a window at the end for bad weather or stuff going wrong. So we had a week spare, but we were in Leh, which is kind of the main town in Ladakh. And we were sitting down having breakfast, like, all kayaking gear, like, with some trail shoes and stuff like that. We were sitting down having breakfast after just finishing like a 10-day trip, absolutely exhausted. We were looking across the valley and we saw like Stuckangri's 6,100 meter peak. And sure, like, we'll give it a go. Like, the next morning we took off and we tried to do it in 3 days. And sure, we got altitude. 3 of the lads made it, in fairness. I didn't summit. I got sick. But like, That's just the thing. Like, we wouldn't even dream of that now. And when you're younger, I think, like, in a nutshell, you're just more stupid, really, aren't you? You just...
Oh, totally, yeah. I mean, back in the days when my brother Keith and myself found that rock climbing gear, man, I don't know. We should have been locked up because we didn't know how to use it or anything. But we were figuring it out as we were going along. Actually, I think the mountain training that I've done over the years is, well, in the earlier days, when I started doing mountain skills and mountain leader training, they started telling us all these dangers and risks, and I was there. Never thought of that. Yeah, youth is a marvelous thing, but it's not always useful.
No, it's not, especially in big mountains. Aaron, thanks so much, man. Thanks for coming on the pod, and we'll chat to you soon, dude.
Take it easy.
Cheers.
This podcast was produced by Earth's Edge. We're a small business based in Ireland who organise big adventures all over the world. For more information about us and the trips discussed on this podcast, visit earths-edge.com or follow us on Instagram. Don't forget to sign up to our mailing list to be in the running to win one of our summit jackets. There's a link in the show notes. And while you're there, if you could subscribe and review the podcast, that'd be brilliant. I'm your host, James McManus. Thanks for listening and have a super week.